Hi, it's Shan Wu with an Under Color of Law hot take on a loss at the Supreme Court for the Trump administration. Not that far-reaching of a loss, and it's a little bit complicated. It's not what it appears to be. But this was a loss where the TRO that was granted against the defunding of the foreign aid, that was not actually being appealed, but it kind of looks like it was. The Supreme Court has upheld the judge's order to the Trump administration, which was really to enforce the TRO. It said to the Trump administration, the district court judge, got a TRO here which stops you from freezing this funding, so you got to start doing the funding. You got to make the payments. That is the piece which the Trump administration was trying to take up on an emergency basis to the Supreme Court. They wanted the court to stop that order, meaning they don't have to start paying. They wanted to delay it so there can be, remember TRO is very quick action, right? They want there to be more fuller briefing on it, make it a preliminary injunction hearing. They want more time. They don't want to have to actually start making these payments. Now, earlier they got a little bit more time because Chief Justice Roberts granted administrative stay, meaning he extended the deadline for a little bit by which they had to start making the payments again, turn on the tap. That deadline's passed. Trump administration asked the court, whoa, don't make us turn on the tap yet. And the court said no. Now, this was one of these so-called shadow docket rulings, meaning it's not a full-blown argument before the court. There's not an extensive bunch of opinions written. Popular misunderstanding of the shadow docket is just because there is an opinion, usually a dissent, that doesn't convert it into something else because it has not been fully briefed. It's not on the regular schedule for the court. So what happened here is the shadow docket rulings are typically unsigned. The normal idea is they're all in agreement on something, and it's really more of an administrative matter. The court wants to signal this is not a big deal. We're not having a full-blown hearing on it. It's not being argued and briefed the way other matters might be that are more weighty. So we're just doing basically a anonymous kind of order that no one justice is taking the credit for. However, you can see the cracks in that if somebody really disagrees with it. And so increasingly we see dissents in these shadow docket rulings, and there's a dissent here. And I'm calling it a 5-4 ruling for the following reason. Justice Alito, big surprise, dissents, and we'll talk about just the depths of his hypocrisy in his dissent in a moment. But Alito dissents, and who joins him? Neil Gorsuch joins him, and also Justice Thomas, and Kavanaugh. So those four are dissenting, and the other five who aren't not dissenting don't sign their names, but you can obviously figure out who they are. And most importantly is the fact that joining the majority of five here, eking out this decision, were Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Amy Coney Barrett. So two conservatives are emerging as kind of moderates, and they sided against the real extreme conservatives. So we'll talk about that in a second. But let's first take a look at Alito's dissent, which is just I would say shocking, I guess it shouldn't be, but it's just so hypocritical. If you want a really good deep dive on all this kind of stuff, take a look at Steve Vladeck's ongoing coverage on the Supreme Court. We'll put that up for you here. And so Vladeck quotes a little bit from Alito's 8-page, I think, dissent to a shadow docket order. One of the things that Alito says is, quote, the government must apparently pay the $2 billion post haste, not because the law requires it, but simply because a district judge so ordered. All right, so obviously that's an enormous misstatement just on the fact, because if a court orders it, that is the lawful order, right? It's not like something different, like the court's doing something and there's the law. Just as a common sense basis, that is a ruling. It's a legal order. It's the law. All right, second of all, this idea that the government must pay the $2 billion post haste makes it sound as though, oh, this is like something that the judge just came up with. You got to pay this money. The whole point here, as Vladeck points out, Congress had already mandated the spending, and these are contractual obligations to be fulfilled. So it's not really something new here. It's just something that was already supposed to have been done here. So he also tries to make the argument that there's something wrong because there's sovereign immunity here. That's just, it's hard to describe how off base that is. It's not like somebody suing the government for their official actions. This is something that is a law that the government came up with. And there is lots of case precedent to say that whatever else may be going on in the area of administrative law, what agencies can do, etc., the government is obligated to pay its bills. So that is a more common sense understanding of Alito's hypocrisy on those issues. He's also making it sound like this Rambo, way outlier district court judge has so much power, it's a terrible thing. This goes to the question of the nationwide injunctions, also how much power a single district court judge can have. And in 2023, in a well-known case, Alito was all in on the idea of a single judge pushing back against the executive branch because the executive branch then was the Biden one. And in that case, which was a Texas case, Alito dissented from the majority, saying that it was fine for the Biden administration to enforce, make decisions about its immigration policy. Why? Because that's a federal matter, remember? And Texas and Louisiana were trying to challenge it. Supreme Court said Texas and Louisiana lack standing, and this outraged Alito, who felt that the single district court, this rogue guy in Texas, should have been upheld because that was the right thing to do. The quote here, Alito said in that case, was, quote, "Nothing in our precedents even remotely supports this grossly inflated conception of, quote, executive power, unquote, which seriously infringes the, quote, legislative powers that the Constitution grants to Congress." I mean, it's enough to make you think you're in a different reality, right? I mean, that sounds exactly like what's happening here, is that the executive is infringing upon the legislative powers of Congress. But here, Alito thinks, oh, it's completely crazy that this judge is pushing back against that. But in the other case, because he's on the other side of the politics, he doesn't like the Biden administration. There he thinks, oh, that's the duty of the judge to stand up for the law there. So it just completely shows how he just twists the law to whatever his personal viewpoints are. One might even question if he even understands that he's doing that. He seems so far afield at this point. Lastly, he has this hyperbole language. He says that the majority is imposing, quote, a $2 billion penalty on the American taxpayers. I mean, again, it's not a penalty. As Vladeck points out, debts are not a penalty. It's just his way of spinning the entire thing that's going on here. So that's Alito's dissent. And here's some interesting backstory to it. The night before this came out, there's a timing question, was Trump's address to Congress. You could call it a State of the Union, but actually it wasn't a State of the Union. Hopefully most of you didn't have to suffer through that. I sort of forced myself to watch it. I'll digress for a moment and put up my blue sky take on the actual takeaways from that horrific speech he did. But afterwards, as is usual, Trump, the president, goes around and thanks people, greets people. Notably absent from attending in person was Justice Alito and Justice Thomas, which was fine. They don't have to be there; it's not required. But he does greet Justice Amy Coney Barrett as well as Kavanaugh, and take a look at their reactions here for a second. So this is reading into it. We can't read their minds, but Justice Coney Barrett doesn't seem all that pleased, to being greeted by Trump. And take a look at Kav's reaction. I mean, he's like, got no part of this. And then, of course, the thing that's going viral is where he says thank you to Justice Roberts. Take a look at that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Howard, thank you again. Thank you again. Won't forget.
So good. So good, sir.
And one could almost imagine that this came out because Roberts was so uncomfortable with being thanked, as though he's doing a favor, for the president. And Trump says to him, I won't forget it, like I'm going to pay you some kind of favor back. I mean, this is like completely the opposite of the image that Roberts would like the court to have. But the reality is, I mean, this was not suddenly decided overnight. They'd been working on this for a while anyway. However, the timing of when to release it wasn't necessarily set in stone at all. They could have released it prior to Trump's message to Congress. Good reasons not to do that, maybe. They don't want to have a Supreme Court decision come down right before he speaks. Maybe, as some have suggested, Roberts was afraid that Trump might say something insulting to them in public. Maybe he was worried about that. But allowing it to come out the next morning also can be seen as a pushback against Trump's speech. But certainly, the real pushback is in this vote, that Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett, very conservative people, are capable of voting with the liberals in certain instances. This is going to come back to the Supreme Court. Remember, right, this was not even really the appeal of the TRO, because you can't appeal TROs. It was appeal of this very narrow question of the enforcement of the TRO. It's going to come back to the judge on the preliminary hearing. It's going to get briefed, and then it's going to go back up to the Supreme Court. It'll be a different posture. It'll really be on the merits at that point. And the merits of this case, like the merits of all these challenges to what Trump is doing and will be doing, is about the limits of what the executive branch can do. And on that point, not so clear what Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett would do. After all, Roberts is the one who gave Trump the keys to the kingdom at this point. He can do anything while he's president. Criminal or not, doesn't matter. So we'll keep an eye on that. All right, that's it for now. Thanks again for the replies and comments. Make sure to follow me on Blue Sky, and we'll talk to you soon.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.